Want to get ahead in digital-first content? The Drop is the go-to newsletter for industry professionals, delivering insider news, trends, and insights straight to your inbox. Navigate the fast-changing landscape of digital-first production, distribution, and monetization. Sign up now for free at dropmedia.co.uk and stay informed with The Drop. Hi, I'm Justin Crosby and welcome to another TellyCast. On this week's show, I'm joined by someone who needs no introduction in the world of social media. Sam Barcroft is back on the front line in a major new role at SWNS Group, and he's stepping into 2026 with an ambitious remit as the news industry repositions itself for the video-first world. Sam's always been ahead of the curve, from building Barcroft into one of the most influential factual studios of the digital era, to mentoring the next generation of creators and helping traditional producers unlearn old habits. Now at SWNS, he's gearing up for a year of serious growth, and today he's going to lift the lid on what the business is planning and where he thinks the smart money is going in 2026. Hey, Sam.
Justin.
Good to see you.
Lovely to be here.
It's been a long time since you were last on the show. I can't even remember how long, but it's
had a glow up. It's had a glow up since then.
It has, yeah, exactly. No, we've kind of a posh new studio and everything, but new surroundings. You're in new surroundings now.
I am.
So we're going to talk about all sorts of different things today. But first of all, let's start with your new role as Group CEO of SWNS Group. Mm-hmm. For those who don't know about that business, because it is, I mean, it wasn't a surprise to me, you taking over that role, because it really sort of reunites you with your early career in the newspaper business. But many people in the traditional TV business might not be aware of them. So tell us about SWNS Group and your role.
Okay, so I got a call earlier this year offering me the opportunity to go into the group as Group CEO. And it just was one of those that sat with me, and the more I thought about it, the more excited I got about it. And so, I find myself today kind of 3.5, 4 months into a new job there, and it's really exciting. So SWNS Media Group is 6 companies, and part of me joining was bringing Creativille into the group, which was a business I founded a couple of years ago. And now we're really such an inflection point in the media scene globally, especially in the UK, that it's an amazing time to be part of a group that has lots of different ways of doing business in the content and in the news media specifically. So the group's got Creativille in it, which is a video consultancy. So we help business leaders figure out how they can succeed with video, from startups all the way up to major broadcasters and publishers. We've also got SWNS, which is the original business, which is 50 years old. It's the UK's largest supplier of news content to major news brands, to the mainstream media.
So it's like a wire service, really, isn't it? It supplies national newspapers with news from all around the world, I assume, not just the UK. Yeah,
we have brilliant journalists and photographers and videographers all over the UK, and then we provide content globally, and we've got people in the US as well. And essentially, when you read the online Daily Mail or the Mirror or the Guardian or the Times, often a lot of that content will come from SWNS. You'll see the picture bylines, and it's a business that was started in Bristol 50 years ago and has acted over a long period of time to become the most kind of well-known independent newswire in the UK. That's grown out because it's founded by people who really love innovation. So it grew out a company which is now 25 years old called 72 Point, which is one of the top 10 consumer PR businesses in the UK, and a really exciting business. And then they've acquired other businesses in the space. So we own a business called Oath, which is a remarkable graphic design studio who have clients like Netflix doing design work for them. We also have Pinpet, which is the UK's leading commercial photography business for public relations, and OnePoll, which is the kind of second most cited polling company in the UK. So it's this amazing set of businesses that really work in synergy extremely well to deliver unbelievable value for brands and for news publishers as well. And so getting back into that game was really exciting, especially at a time when it's changing so fast.
Yeah, well, it must be like coming full circle for you, because when you were talking then, I remember, the Barcroft wire was obviously a photography wire service, and then which expanded into video, which then took you into the whole world of video. So it's it's fascinating now taking your experience and your learnings all the way through building Barcroft Media and selling that business, and then advising lots of other companies to, now, as you say, interesting inflection point going into 2026 is really exciting time, isn't it? And I was going to ask you what you've learned through all those years that you're going to be taking to SWNS, but I suppose that's too big a question.
Not really. I mean, there's a lot of lived experience. I made a lot of mistakes over 20 years of running a similar business previously, and that's actually quite valuable because I know where not to go, if that makes sense. And often when you're building businesses, the common sense next move isn't actually the correct one. So we all trust our own common sense. But
when you say common sense, do you mean safe or perceived as safe?
No, I just think the thing that pops to the front of mind of most reasonable people in innovation is often the wrong thing to do. And that's, I can't really explain it, but it's something that I've found quite often through my career. And so knowing when you should concentrate on something that feels counterintuitive, that's experience, and so I suppose I bring experience to the table. And I'm also aware that moving companies through change is challenging, and that's what I've been doing a lot of in the last few years, helping businesses with change. And so I bring that to the table as well. But mostly I hope I'm going to bring enthusiasm and try and build great culture, positive culture. The biggest challenge that our industry in content has at the moment, I believe, is an apathy about the future, and you really need growth culture if you're going to succeed. And growth culture is all about getting excited about what's possible rather than terrified of what feels impossible.
Trying it, right?
Yeah, and the way to do that is to be brave, to hold hands, to go at things together, and to accept you're not going to win every battle. You have to think like a attacking midfield player, not like a goalie or a defender sometimes. And so I'm getting quite excited about supporting teams to be brave and to imagine what's possible, and then to try it. And if it doesn't work, to be around each other and say, hey, we gave it our best shot, let's go again. Not to worry about getting the sack next week because they've messed up. So really I'm trying to bring that energy of expansive thinking, or thinking outside the box, and of thinking how we can actually move things forward in a really positive way, not just for ourselves, but as businesses within our group that really exist to service the wider content economy. How do we make our clients feel bold and excited about things? How can we support them better and better? Because that a rising tide lifts all boats. And I think bringing a new wave of energy in and new ways of doing things should be quite exciting. I'm on a mission to build the UK's most exciting new media group. That's what I'm here to do, and that might feel a bit odd in the creator economy that I'm working in a traditional news sector. But I actually think that combination of decades of deep experience and editorial integrity has built a remarkable trust. SWNS has trust like pretty much no other business in the UK. If you then add that ability to speak to people all over the world on multiple devices in multiple ways, that's super exciting for me.
That's the opportunity, isn't it? I mean, and that's really interesting for a number of different aspects. First of all, the trust and the truth, essentially, which we're starting to be challenged by AI. Obviously, I mean, the amount of AI slop that I'm seeing on pretty much all of my video feeds right now.
It's hilarious, but it's not great for us as a society,
Well, it kind of, I mean, it kind of is hilarious, but I'm starting to find myself really annoyed by them. It might be, I don't know, I think I saw something of a swordfish jumping onto a boat or something like that, and you could just, it's that 5%, you can tell. And my annoyance is that I just wasted 10 seconds of my life watching this piece of AI generated slop, right?
Yeah.
But I think the opportunity, as you say, to combine that, trusted news sources with, amazing content and creating content that people are going to consume, and people are consuming in many different ways today is definitely an exciting one. It's something that you covered off in the recent Digital Content Forum panel with The Sun and Sky and ITN.
Yeah.
And that was really, I thought that was really interesting, and perhaps points the way to the way that those news organisations are looking at communicating with their subscribers and viewers as well.
Yeah, I think the challenge for established news brands is that for many years they were trying to hold the line. They were trying to get people to come to them. And they felt like by not fully engaging with social media or the creator economy, they would move people to come directly to their broadcast products, and the truth is that did work for some time, but now it isn't working anymore. And so those people are now in a race. They really have to move very, very aggressively towards those platforms now to try and regain the viewership that they basically let through their fingers, and
well, as a subscriber, he was like desperately holding onto the subscribers, particularly in newspaper sense, and that obviously massively changed. And
it's worked very well for broadsheet newspapers. So when you look at businesses like the Times, that's in rude health and doing very well. The New York Times in the US has proved that you can build an amazing business out of games and recipes, but that supports a vibrant global news brand, and so we've got the examples of how to do news well. The challenge is, especially in what you might call free news or lower market or popular news, that's been very challenged because the free model doesn't work anymore. The advertising doesn't add up to the cost of producing quality content anymore, and so that's a massive existential challenge to, I think, many levels of media, not just news. I think news in particular, because news is expensive and it doesn't have a shelf life. Whereas if you're working in Fact 10 or entertainment, you can build something that can make a lot of money over many years. It's a bit tougher in news. The big problem is there's not a documentary industry left in the UK. We'd like to pretend there is, but it's a wafer thin industry compared to just 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting. We just saw Sunnyside as shuttered as well, which is the biggest documentary festival in Europe. Yeah,
it's such a shame, but literally we've lost a whole industry.
Yeah.
And I think it's so sad. I aspired to be a documentarian for decades, and I was lucky enough to achieve that when we had strong broadcasters in the UK commissioning lots and lots of documentaries every week. Now it's an event. If there's a fresh documentary on a PSB, it's literally maybe one or two a week if you're lucky. And so unfortunately, the industry has been decimated as a result and will continue to be. So really, I'm interested in continuing the battle of bringing helpful information in entertaining ways to the general public in the UK that is true and real and actually based upon proper journalistic standards and practices. I care about that.
And do you see parallels when it comes to the news industry and the challenges it faces now and the solutions that you're coming up with the traditional TV industry?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because the news industry peaked in the 90s, the newspaper industry particularly, and it had almost reinvented itself in recent years to quite a stable model. What it had done is it had worked out that if it wrote hundreds of articles a day on every website and absolutely obsessed over SEO and thinking about how it could make sure it reached as many people as it could through search, that it kind of had a viable model. And that was greatly aided by Google Discover, which pushed a lot of traffic to reputable news brands. Then a couple of years ago, Google Discover changed its algorithm to favour smaller niche brands of factual content. And that has destroyed the UK news industry, from a online website perspective. The difference in television is much simpler, actually. It's not one actor changing the way an algorithm works. It's actually all about the shift from scheduled viewing to streaming and video on demand. If you've got a brilliant video on demand site like a Netflix or an iPlayer, you don't actually need very much new content on a day. You actually you need the shows that everybody must watch, the high value shows. You don't need lots and lots of features series at 8 o'clock, or you don't need lots of topical documentary at night because you don't have any slots to fill. Look at Disney Plus. How many new things are there on Disney? Very, very few. How many subscribers have they got? Over 100 million, all paying money every single month, regardless of the fact that there's hardly any new things appearing on there. Certainly not to the volumes that there would have been across a UK PSB kind of schedule. So really television is a live events business, broadcast television now, big entertainment shows, large sporting events, and major breaking news. That's really all that's left in television.
Yeah.
And streaming is now all about high value drama and the odd pinnacle documentary, and is desperate to get into the live sports space as well. So that's what's left. And so if I'm starting a production company now, if it's not in those spaces, then I really need to have a strong word with myself.
Yeah.
Or I've got a brilliant idea that nobody else has gotten onto yet, So it's an interesting moment and quite a tough one for a lot of people.
So for your business then, obviously you're very much focused, you've established group of businesses that you're looking at ways to incorporate the creator economy approach to the news industry and the way that your businesses work with the wider world from a service perspective. Can we expect to see any new? You talked about documentary brands, because obviously that's something that Barcroft was, regularly number one news service when it on YouTube in the UK for a number of years. And can we expect to see new brands being built? The new consumer brands? Are you going to go direct to create new channels as well as servicing your clients? Would you look to make a return to the sort of the factual space when it comes to original channels?
Well, look, don't hold me to it, Justin, because things change in startups, as you know. Although this is an established group, Creativeville is still a startup within it. So that gives us a space to play in those areas. I think there is interest in the group to do that. We're looking at a number of opportunities right now. I think that there's a gap, in that space because it's been hard to find ways to make money. And so as an entrepreneur, I sit here and think, well, is that a gap that needs filling? Is there an unmet need in the audience out there who are desperate to watch that kind of content, who aren't getting it from other places? Now, we're just working through that at the moment and figuring out where the demand lives, because the one thing I've learned from 20 years of messing it up and a bit of success along the way is there's no point deciding what you want to make. You've got to focus on what people want that they can't get, and that's the difference between a producer and a publisher, and so you have to have a publisher mindset, which is what's the customer need that needs solving. So for me, I'm working with colleagues at the moment to figure that out, and also figure out the crossover within the wider group, because obviously at SWNS, we're reporting dozens of exclusive news stories a week. We've got incredible access to news-based IP and stories and access. And so that's really exciting. And looking at how over time we develop that into a funnel of incredible potential IP. And then
content.
And then joining that up with what we can do at Creativeville, which is to build consumer brands from the floor up, from the ground up. That will hopefully lead to some really interesting things. We've got incredible journalistic colleagues, SWNS, who have already had some great success in selling access for some of that IP over the years. And so we're looking at the moment at a couple of projects to get that going. And then thirdly, really, the big opportunity within the group is the fact that in the wider group, we have so many brilliant brand clients, and when you think about the challenge for brands, consumer brands, if you're a high street brand, how do you reach your audience through media anymore? It's really tough. Before, it was very simple. You put some money in radio, you put some money on outdoor, you bought some slots on TV, and then you knew if you had a campaign, you'd get extra people come in and buy your stuff. Now, it's very difficult to find your audience. And so, as we know, brands are seeking much more diverse ways of reaching their audiences. Now, we've got all this IP over here. We've got all these clients over there, brand clients, really interested in new ways of telling stories. Making that ecosystem work offers a remarkable generational opportunity, I think. And in the public relations, branded content space, there's a moment waiting to happen, an evolution that's kind of brewing quite nicely at the moment there. And so it's exciting times at 72 Point Towers over in Farringdon, starting to figure this out and starting to work out how to marry those two worlds of brilliant creative ideas and the creator economy. Creativeville working with 72 Point is also super exciting.
And that's more about sort of pull marketing, i.e. creating amazing content for brands or brands creating that content, brands as broadcasters.
That's right. Yeah.
Making content that people genuinely want to see rather than interruption marketing, which is the old advertising model. And there was a lot of money in that, in that space, maybe not so much anymore, but there's brands still need to communicate and find new ways to communicate with their audiences.
Yeah, and if you go on TikTok Shop, it's hard to differentiate product anymore, right? You're just seeing stuff all the time. There's 1,000,001 services and products out there. So brands are struggling to cut through just because really the shows we make are brands, but also, the stuff people want to sell are brands, and it all converges. And what's interesting to me are companies like CarWow. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a brilliant car brand on YouTube, which does remarkable videos that get anywhere between 500,000 and 1.5 million views per video. And it's essentially a cool new Top Gear, full of races, reviews, fun, all shot at absolutely top spec. Well, it's not a car channel. It's actually a car sales business that has a YouTube channel put on. But it's really now both a brilliant media brand and a brilliant car sales company, and it's turning over, 50, 60 million pounds a year now by making videos that are so good that people choose to buy their car from that place, and spend 40 grand on a brand new car via this YouTube channel. And so that is the way that content becomes a brand and real life purchases and services are brands is now coming together. We all know about Red Bull. And I don't know if you've seen the recent skiing down Everest Red Bull film.
Yeah.
20 million views in a very short period of time, a brilliant documentary. I think there'll be people out there that in the world that don't realise Red Bull is a caffeinated soft drink. They'll just think it's an adventure channel, and it can make a lot of money just out of its content now, and so as we go forward, that kind of ability to build proper big consumer businesses, which Mr. Beast is, I suppose, the biggest example of with his new, prospectus, is really exciting. And I think it's how the existing industry that we're part of, that's so good at the story selling element, starts to make sure it understands the elements that it's not as good at, and is humble enough to realize that it needs to think like that if it really wants to do another 20 years of being commercially valid.
Well, that's a really interesting point, because you've spent a lot of time since you sold the Barcroft business and since you exited Future advising TV, more traditional TV production companies. And so, and just something you just said there is like, there's companies that are willing to adopt the practices needed in the next generation of media, because it feels like, we were chatting just before we came on air about, 2 years ago, it seemed to be the red flags were really out for everybody. You've been working in this industry for 2 decades, so you could see it coming for a long time. And I think many others of us that have been working around this space could see that happening a long time. But the TV industry was like, well, I'm not listening. We're not listening. Obviously, that's a broad brushstroke. Talking about all the TV industry, but I'm speaking specifically about TV producers, independent TV producers in many cases, who've just been wedded to the traditional way that the industry's worked for 40 years. But, and again, to an earlier point that you talked about, that they are producers because they are producing for those broadcasters that have got a need. And now it is about thinking like a publisher and being much more commercially minded about it. In all of those companies that you spoke to, do you think that the traditional industry is willing to make that change? Again, all the companies that you spoke to, what's your take on the traditional TV industry now?
Well, it's as you'd expect. It has been a very big industry in the UK. So there's lots of different touch points. There's actually loads of success that you can point to in there in different parts. So
I realise it's a very catch-all statements that we're talking about.
I suppose I've had a lot of frustration because having made that transition myself with my colleagues, a big team of us figured a way through the jungle, and so we want everybody else coming through the jungle. We want to say, hey, this is the path, come through here, it's going to be all right. Yeah, there's going to be a few dodgy bits, but you can make it. Come on, let's go. And that's why I set up Creativeville, because I really wanted to help people get down that path because there's never been a lack of interest in improving people's businesses or those people wanting to be part of the next stage. That's not been the issue. The issue has always been a lack of understanding of how to do it.
Yeah.
We did it at Barcroft because, quite frankly, we couldn't sustain our news business without getting money from publishing. We needed it to survive. It wasn't an option. It was a necessity. So we had no choice but to lock in, go 100% in and just focus on it. And we were very lucky in the end that came through, and that worked out well for us. We built 15 shows that made a lot of money on social advertising, and that actually helped us sell our business alongside a TV production company. And that they both work really well together. So we're very lucky that in the end came together. It was hard for a long time. Now the challenge is for people, they know they want to do that, but they don't know how. So we come in and we help people with the how. And there is a playbook on YouTube that is free that everybody can download to say, how do you make, but what the problem that most TV producers have is not that they don't know that there's instructions. They're all very bright people, very talented people. It's that they confuse the model. So they think that there was this model in television where you went to see a broadcaster with a great idea and said, hey, I want to make this brilliant film. And they said, oh, I love that film. What a great idea. We'd love that. And they'd say, we'll give you 200 grand to make that film. And the producer would go away and figure it out. Maybe it's 220 or 210, but they'd make a deal. Then they'd give the producer a third of that money up front and say, go on then, go and make the film. And then they'd give them a bit more. And the producer would essentially be cash flowed for that whole piece of risk. And then they get paid all the money when they deliver it. And then it would get sold around the world and they'd take most of that money as well. And it was just an amazing business because you got to go and make films that you wanted to make all over the world and somebody else was paying for the whole thing, right? Who's not going to love that?
It sounds, when you talk about that now, it does sound
ridiculous,
like a brilliant...
right? Yeah. It's like a bubble. It was a 40-year bubble. Yeah. And so essentially that was based upon the independent TV kind of sphere. And people like John McVeigh did an amazing job of getting ridiculous terms that nobody would ever look at anymore, these days. Terms of trade and things like that were absolutely unbelievable for the economy of the UK. The economy of the UK media economy has been smashed to bits by YouTube and everything else. And the establishment has looked away the whole time. They haven't figured out new ways of managing that. It's only just in the last year or two they've figured out that those big companies needed prominence in YouTube and social media. They left it far too little, far too late. So the challenge now is you've got TV producers saying, hold on, can't I go to YouTube and they give me 200 grand to make my film? And it's like, no. It's a hard no. They tried that a bit 10 years ago and they went, this is ridiculous. Let's not do that. Because they've got tens of thousands, or millions. There's over 100 million YouTube channels out there full of people like you, Justin, just getting on with it, just making the stuff and putting it out there and finding ways to build a business out of it. That's the offer. The offer is YouTube says, we'll share your content with everyone in the world or 2 billion people in the world for free. And then if that helps you out, brilliant. And actually, we'll try and sell some ads. And if we can, you can have half the money, right? It's a pretty good deal, and so...
That's the important thing that people often don't quite grasp, I think, is that it's about finding the niche. It's just almost like narrowcasting, if you like. It's finding the exact niche, but that niche, however small it might seem in the UK, it's a global niche, and that could be many millions of people.
That's right. And if you become number one at aquarium channel, fishing, I wrote an article about it called the Blue Cheese Channel. And I said, if I was going to make one channel as an individual producer right now, I'd make it about soft blue cheese. Yeah. Right? Because I went on YouTube and I love blue cheese, right? And I went on YouTube, I was like, blue cheese. And there was nothing. There was no blue cheese channel. And I thought to myself, well, that's a massive opportunity. It sounds ridiculous, right? Why would you do that? Well, because you start making film about blue cheese, you love it, you talk about it, you do taste tests, you travel maybe to a dairy somewhere to actually see them making the blue cheese. you meet other people who are brilliant at blue cheese. All of a sudden, you'll get 100 subscribers that absolutely love blue cheese. There might be some blue cheese makers or sellers or delicatessens in there. There might be some travel writers or whatever. And you build a very small community. But those people all absolutely love blue cheese. You've got a community, right? And once you scale that past 1,000 people, if 10% of them buy your blue cheese Christmas box, all of a sudden you're making money, and then if you think about it, if that then builds to 10,000 people that like it, and all of a sudden you're collaborating with a wine channel and they're trying to talk about your channel, all of a sudden you've got something that really starts to mean something. Yep. The biggest problem that TV producers don't understand is that YouTube is a 5 to 10 year game. It's a third horizon play. You start, you show up, you do it for ages and ages and ages, and you get nothing back. Okay, it's like shouting into the void. It's really miserable and it's really difficult. But in the end, if you keep going and you keep listening to the comments and seeing what elements work of your content, in the end, it will start to work. And when it does, can be transformative. And so the truth is, that's why TV producers run a mile from YouTube, is because it doesn't fit their business model. And most of the time, because they've had a remarkable business model for so long, they just can't get past that. It feels like they've been cheated upon by their better half. It's just a piece of grief that they just can't move around. And so, but if you're 20 and you're sat in your bedroom and you want to do a channel about K-pop demon hunters and you get really excited about it and you make a costume and you do some impressions and all the rest of it, and you start getting, all of a sudden you've started a career as a YouTuber, and you don't have to go and work in the bank if you don't want to, because you can build something off your own back. Now that sounds very trite, but it's true. And the biggest entertainment brand in the planet, Netflix, spends hundreds of millions a year on its YouTube channel. It's because it's a remarkable ecosystem that actually helps build brands like pretty much no other, and I'm not the biggest fan, but it is what it is. And so for TV producers, I think most of them should just not bother anymore. Stop talking about it. If you're not going to find £1 million or £2 million to spend over, 5 to 10 years and just commit to it 100%, just shut up and get on with pitching your shows to the same people you've always pitched them to, and hope that you'll get one of the handful of commissions that are still available, because that's your business.
And it is a handful.
Yeah, it is a handful. And you've got to be really honest with yourself, strip it right back, keep those 2 or 3 people in your business that really, really make the difference, and slog it out and keep going and just focus on what you are the very best at within your niche within TV production. And in the end, hopefully the business will find a way to make that sustainable for you. But don't think that you've got a lifeboat called YouTube that's going to come and replace your business with a similar model, because it just doesn't exist.
Yeah. When we look at YouTube and obviously all the other social platforms as well, it's giving producers access to data that they've never had before. And obviously that can be quite daunting, because it's like, well, okay, that's great, but what do I do with that? And there is this sort of very much the archetypal marketing funnel, isn't there, when it comes to, the amount of impressions and then coming down to how long people have watched the shows, etc. What is the single most important metric that you look at from a YouTube perspective? Let's talk about YouTube specifically.
Well, I don't think there's a single one. Like when I look at YouTube Studio, which is the back-end analytics tool within YouTube, I suppose I do care a lot about views, because subscribers, it's complicated, but essentially it's anybody that ever thought, it was quite good on YouTube, might click a button. That doesn't mean they're ever coming back, and so I think subscribers is kind of like a commitment metric for how long you've been going and how many people have at a certain stage liked what you do. I think views is what's more important. So if I see channels that have got sustained amount of views on their network, that's important as a starting point. But then it's all about engagement, because as we know, some brands will just pay a click factory in Vietnam money to just rack up false views on, and it's pretty obvious, because you'll see something with 100,000 views and 2 comments. And from miles away that means it's all fake views. So it's a combination of that, and most people don't realize that the best feedback on YouTube by a million miles is actually qualitative. It's not quantitative. So it's about looking at the comments and actually reading those comments, because those comments are what you can act on. Yeah, it's really easy. If you've done 5 videos in a row and they've each got 100 views and then one gets 10,000 views, you definitely know organically that there's something different in that video that meant YouTube put it in front of many more people, you know, so that's a big signal, right?
Yeah.
But the other signal will be why. And the way to figure that out is usually sits in the comments. And so it's really about combining quantitative and qualitative, but really digging into the qualitative, because that's where all the secrets are.
That's really interesting you say that. And that, again, you know, without harking back too much to the digital content forum, that was one of the really interesting takeouts that I took from the investors panel. And we had 3 of the biggest investors into YouTube businesses there. And they were just talking about that's how they're valuing channels now. And they're going in and supersizing channels, investing in them, sometimes buying them outright and seeing the potential. Because again, it's about community, isn't it? That's the other single biggest difference about creating for YouTube rather than creating for TV. It's you're building a community and you're listening to that community, nurturing it and listening to what they want and creating for them. And so that's quite different to TV, where it's like you deliver the show and then that's it. And you might get, you know, the overnights, you know, to put an email to you like 2-3 months later. Yeah,
and I think that's the definition of broadcast, isn't it? Is to share something in the air and then basically walk away. So where's the receive mode? There's not a receive mode in that, you know. And actually, YouTube is about building a community, and it's just basic IT, right? So the IT guys are going, well, how do you get people to stay on this site a bit longer? Well, you say, well, everybody wants to be heard. So if we allow them to put comments on something and they can have a conversation, then that means a lot more than just watching something and going and trying to talk to people down a pub about it or at school or whatever. So it's just basic, you know, retention stuff. Like most of these platforms couldn't give a monkeys about your content. As long as it's legal, you know, they don't care what it is. They're just interested in how do you keep people on Reels for that extra 10 seconds? How do we serve you a few more ads? You know, and it's a remarkable business. You know, Mark Zuckerberg said he's on a run rate of something like 50 billion on Reels advertising this year. You know, it's an unbelievable amount of money, you know, every year just on Reels. And he doesn't even give any of that back to the content providers. You know, like he keeps all of it. Like a few years ago, he just went, hold on, we're giving these people that make the videos money. Well, there's no point. They're not going to go away if we take it all away again. And he was right. So he took all the money away, and people are still putting all their videos up on there because they have decided that being able to broadcast to everyone in the world and get all that share of voice is actually worth the money to pay for actually making it and sharing it themselves. And so we have to be really honest with ourselves and say, this is a remarkable business model, and how do we use it to be able to facilitate us to share the stories we want to share? You know, we have to come away from we deserve this or it shouldn't be like that, and just accept it how it is and lean in if that's useful to what you're doing and trying to build. But instead of building a business that just makes content for a living, which is getting more and more difficult, I think if you really want to build a robust business, the models I'm looking at are subscription layers. So like, how do we create businesses that people are happy to pay to have that content? And then on the second hand is, or you build communities that you can monetize in lots of different ways, like you've done so successfully with TellyCast. When you look at your events and magazine and other things that you've built here, that they're the 2 models that I think stand the test of the next turn of this, the next decade of this game. You know, it's look at The Rest is History and how brilliantly they've built a paid layer for that, and The Rest is Politics and all the rest of it. Look at how many businesses are now building these multi-revenue stream models that give the content away for free, but because they have a community and they stand for something and they're number one in their sector, can build a whole business out around it. You know, that for me they're the 2 models that I think are most interesting at the moment.
And talking about video podcasts, because we've seen remarkable growth in that, and we've certainly seen companies like Goalhanger have, you know, huge success, and we've just obviously seen a Netflix deal for Goalhanger around the 2026 World Cup, which is really, really fascinating. We've seen, some real success for companies like Cold Glass, who are doing the Dish podcast, but with Waitrose, which is, amazingly successful as well. And lots of other companies, Diary of a CEO, Flight Story, obviously had huge amounts of success. To me, that seems like an obvious move the first move for a TV production company to try and get into the digital world, because it's relatively inexpensive. And whether it's a two-person chat show or discussion show, it's the production costs are fairly low, limited. You can do, a deal with talent, which is, a percentage deal with talent, which is, relatively easy to do. Surely that's the easiest step. Would you say that was the first step that a TV production company might take?
It really depends, because it depends what problem they're trying to solve. And at the end of the day, if you're in business, there's no point doing things until you know why you're doing them. And try some stuff out by all means. If you feel like you need inspiration, make some things and put them in different places and see what happens. I think that's the most important step to some extent, is to do something rather than to talk about it and do nothing. However, most people that are interested have already done that. And most of them have been underwhelmed because they've done it far too quickly and given themselves far too small a chance of success. I don't think there is an exact right move. If you decide what it is you're passionate about and what the business you want to build, then you've got to look at how you then resource that and what type of content is going to be right to promote, to give yourself the best chance. I think video podcasts work really well on YouTube because they are fantastic for YouTube, because they're often half an hour to an hour long. YouTube now allows you to put an advert break every couple of minutes into the feed. And so that means that instead of 5 years ago when you had one advert at the beginning and maybe one at the end, in a half-hour podcast, you can maybe have 8, 9, 10 ad breaks, right? So they're making 10 times the money from you watching that, okay? So it's not because YouTube like podcasts, it's just they're finding more ways to make money. That's as simple as that. Yeah. So at the end of the day, podcasts are a brilliant medium. I love podcasts, and I'm delighted for all the companies that have really lent in and taken advantage of that. But they've done it because they had stories they needed to tell, and that was the best way to do it for their businesses. I could say that there are other businesses out there that have gone and made an hour scripted special and dropped that on YouTube and had remarkable success from that. So there's no perfect right way. TikTok's probably the easiest platform to reach pure audience and to then commercialize it through TikTok Shop, right? So that's having a huge moment. So I think Substack's another one. If you want to build trust, Substack is a remarkable way to do that. So for me, you've got the toolkit. The question is, who do you want to influence, and how are you best going to do that on which platform? And that's where I would start from if it was.
It's like setting up a business, isn't it?
It's like, it's
actually, rather than just creating content, it's like, this is a content business.
Yeah.
What's the business model? What's the opportunity?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think because we are all content producers for a living, we all obsess over content, but that's not how the world feels about it. What problem are you solving for a portion of the world, and how can you be the number one at doing that? And you got to start from there. And then content is either a small or a large part of that, and the truth is better to try, very cheap to try now. Very difficult to raise money to start a content business now because everybody knows you can do it for nothing, essentially. And so I think anybody with business plans saying, I'm going to start a content company, probably don't waste time pitching it. Just find a way to start it without requiring any money from anyone. Because most of the time now that's pretty much doable physically. Yeah. And so that barrier to entry has disappeared, which means if you're a TV production company, you've got as much clout as you have if you're a college student, and you just got to accept that, and work with it and use it to your advantage, I think. Yeah.
So 2026, we talked about earlier on, it really does feel like a real inflection point. I'm probably sure I've probably said that at the end of every year since I've been doing this podcast, having started it in lockdown. But what do you think, anything that you're looking at in 2026 outside of your own business, in terms of trends, content trends, in terms of opportunities, what are your key predictions, you think, for 2026 in this industry?
Oh, well, they're all going to be wrong. So let's just start with that.
Yeah, well, that's
out
fine.
Of the way. I think news influencers are going to start to become more of a thing. We saw a bit of it previously. It's ended quite badly for some in that space, especially a few of the right-wing kind of influencers that have tried to become news influencers. But I think in the world of influencing, news is a very underserved vertical. So I think we'll see more and more of that. And after our panel at the Digital Content Forum, it was clear that a few of those bigger news businesses were looking at how they could create
that's a strategy for them,
generation of talent. Yeah. And so I think we'll see that. I think the World Cup will be huge for digital in 2026. I think rest is football going is a indicator of that. But I think we'll see so much more content than we've ever seen before from a World Cup, on every level. And so I'm very excited to see what innovation comes out of that. And I think in other ways, things won't change very much. I think we've kind of found a new social and streaming balance now. That's the industry we're in now, social and streaming in video. And I think it's now a proper ecosystem. I think the Netflix deal with Warner Brothers is looking like an absolute car crash. And I think that will be difficult on many levels because there will have to be a rebundling across television for television to survive in the shape that it is in the moment. So I think you will see more and more consolidation across TV, possibly in the UK, definitely in the US and Canada and other places. So I think there will be a lot of change in television, but not a lot of change in streaming and social. The other big move is in the UK is Paramount winning the Champions League for 2027. And I think that will shift a few things around this year for next year. And I think potentially the Mail buying the Telegraph will do the same thing. I think that you'll see further media consolidation across publishing in the UK as well. So consolidating at the top level of traditional media, but I think streaming is one, and the winners are quite happy with how they're doing and how things are. I think social is very established and essentially will become more and more of the marketing mix, and erode value in other areas of marketing. So the mainstream media will consolidate to survive as a result. Yeah.
And being a bit more specific about, we've seen microdramas, really kind of sweep in from China and Asia and really some of these apps that we've seen really, making enormous amounts of money around the world, also in the States and to a lesser extent in the UK. How do you see vertical video moving forward from this point? Because obviously at the moment it's mainly app-based, but you would imagine that will probably, different monetization models will bring that onto the likes of TikTok and the likes of Reels.
Possibly. I mean, you can see that they might do that. I think it's still a relatively minor business model outside of China, so I think there's a move. It's essentially just another way of watching a soap opera. So will it work in sport? Will it work in comedy? Will it work in other formats? I'm not sure it will actually. I think there's something about soap opera cliffhangers that just suits to 2-minute kind of vignettes that you can come back to. And it's a certain community that really like them. So I think it's a slight red flag, if I'm honest. Not red flag, red herring rather. So I think it's an interesting way to get people to pay for content, but I think it is genre specific right now. And I think it's potentially a bit limited, but I'm not a fan. So therefore, I've got a particular bias probably against it. So I'm probably missing something. I remember Evan Spiegel telling us in a room once that TikTok was going to be a massive thing when he was running Snapchat. And I kind of thought, probably overplaying it a bit here, Evan, and he was spot on, wasn't he? So I think things that you don't understand, you shouldn't write off. But I think vertical video is here to stay. I think it's just another Snapchat event I went to. I said, why are you all in vertical video? And they said, and this was right at the beginning of Snapchat, and they said it's because it's just more natural to hold a phone upright than it is to hold it on its side. And so that's why we've taken a bet on vertical video, which is a differentiator for them back in the day. Nobody was doing that. I think that I still watch sports highlights and vertical video and you can't see the ball. There's still lots of things that don't work about vertical video but for TikTok, I think they're still going to get bigger and bigger. And I think in the end, TikTok is going to continue to disrupt YouTube more than anything else. And YouTube as one television and TikTok as one social is probably what I think we're going to start to see more and more in 2026.
All right. Well, now it's time for Story of the Week, where my guests get to nominate the content industry news story that's caught their eye in the past few days. Sam, you've just mentioned a few. I don't know. Is it one of those going to be your story of the week?
My story of the week is Warner Brothers Discovery being bought by Netflix and now apparently being bought by Paramount instead. So as of today.
It's changing every day, right?
Yeah, and so...
Trump came out yesterday, didn't he? And he said that could be a problem, which means it is a problem.
Well, and then when you read down that story list a little bit, you realise that Paramount is now owned by Skydance, which is David Ellison's company. And David is the son of Larry Ellison of Oracle fame, who is a big pal of Donald Trump's. And so Donald Trump has decided he doesn't like the Netflix deal, despite Ted Sarandos, co-CEO of Netflix, going to be friendly with Trump at the White House in recent times. And it's just really depressing. Although I think if Netflix don't seal that deal, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world for them. I saw a brilliant article by Evan Shapiro yesterday about the actual value of that deal. And I think it's been well overinflated. And I don't see that buying those assets in the medium term makes any sense for Netflix, because it'd take about 40 years to pay back, by Evan's estimates. So even if you half that, 20 years to pay back is a lot of money and a lot of time. And so I think Netflix are seeking to bundle up, but I still think they've got the brand equity not to have to do that. Personally, I'm not inside their business. I think Paramount need more mainstream media very quickly indeed to get scale, because so much of what they do is aging out. And so I think it is a more dramatic deal and requirement of them, and that's why they're bidding so aggressively to win it. I think if they do win it, hopefully Netflix find another way to come again.
It was interesting that their lawyers, Paramount lawyers, actually, waved a flag, didn't they? And actually came out just before the Netflix deal was announced, I think a day or two before, sort of crying foul a little bit in terms of that deal. But it sounds like this is a tussle that's going to go on a little while, doesn't it?
Possibly. And, I think it's disappointing because it doesn't feel like it's a apples and apples comparison at the moment. And it must be quite worrying to work in those bigger companies and realise that the deals aren't necessarily being assessed in a completely scientific way by the powers that be.
Well, let's move on to Hero of the Week, Sam. Who or what is your Hero of the Week? What is there somebody out there that you want to sort of glaze, as my daughter would say?
Glaze, yeah, I love a glaze. So I'm going to glaze Curly Media. A company I'm not sure you know about, not many people necessarily will yet, run by Emma and Laura, who just dropped the Spotify Unwrapped in the UK. So Spotify Unwrapped commissioned an amazing film that's been unbelievably successful that came out last week. And you'd expect that to come from a top kind of advertising production company. But no, it came from a proper original digital company who, by working super hard for Spotify on a number of other tasks, got the opportunity to do the big one.
Fantastic.
And they've absolutely smashed it. And it's relevant, it's brilliant, it's all those things that you'd love it to be, and it's full of the best talent and the best creators, and it's all if you know references, and it's just a wonderful piece of work. And when you see things like that coming from companies, I mean, I've been lucky enough to work with them for the last few years, and you just think sometimes the good guys get what they deserve. It's a lovely moment this week.
Well, that's good to see that. Well, there we go. That's Curly Media getting glazed there. And who or what are you telling to get in the bin, Sam?
FIFA.
Right.
Yeah, I just think we should put the whole of FIFA in the bin.
Oh my God.
And I think we should then staple the bin shut. And I think we should put sellotape round it again and again and again and again. And I think we should set fire to it. And then we should offer it to Elon Musk to send to Mars and then explode.
Yeah. Oh my God. 2.5 hours, that show.
But listen,
2.5 hours of my life that I'm never getting back.
I'm just very glad that they brought about world peace. Because if they hadn't, it would have been a bit of a stretch, wouldn't it? But now they brought about world peace. It's actually fine.
I love Trump putting the medal on himself. That was a beautiful thing to see. And the kind of banter between Rio Ferdinand and the floor was like just was not working. And it was just the biggest cringe moment of the year, I think, on TV.
Well, Dubai's newest full-time resident, Rio Ferdinand.
Is that right?
Apparently so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he was a Leeds player for a short amount of time, but
we have to give him his kudos.
He went. He chose the wrong path after that, but there we are. Sam, thank you so much for coming on the show. Brilliant to see you. Really exciting what you're doing in the new business. So look forward to hearing more about that over the next year or so. And I wish you a great Christmas and put your feet up out there on the farm.
Yeah,
and,
thank you, Justin. Always a pleasure to be on TellyCast and be part of this amazing community that you've built. Kudos to you. 5 years in is a really impressive thing that we often... everybody in the industry loves what you're doing and feel very supported by you and your team, really helping us all come together in brilliant ways. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Sam. That's brilliant. Okay. Well, that's about it for this week's show. TellyCast was produced by Spirit Studios and recorded in London. We'll be back next week with another show. Until then, stay safe.